Hello, my name is Ilona, and in this video I want to talk about programming. Someone asked me a question under a YouTube video in a reaction. Well, how do they program us? Because I talk about programming, the dark elite is programming us to stay in a certain frequency, in a certain energy, because that's the way they can manipulate us. And well, this is a humongous subject, so I try to keep it as simple as possible. Programming itself is not really positive or negative. It already happens when you're born in a certain family. That family has certain patterns, certain programs that are kind of running. So you already, when you're born there, will be raised in a certain way. You'll be raised in a certain family unit, a certain area, culture, cultural things. You'll be influenced in that way. And especially when you're very young, certainly till you're like 7 years old, you're like a sponge. Everything that happens around you, you just take in for real. And that's most likely a lot of people who are not aware of all these patterns they've picked up when they were young are actually living out all those patterns, especially with your parents. How do they communicate? How do they act with each other? Later on, you will start to search unconsciously, if you're not aware of that, of a partner that will resemble or your mother or your father or certain patterns that you're used to. So that's pretty much programming in itself. You're already born in a certain family that will program you. There's not something wrong about that, because that kind of helps our survival as well. Because you're taught how to live in a certain way, what's necessary, especially centuries ago. It was very important for our survival to know certain skills. So programming itself, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm also not talking about MK Ultra. That's extreme programming, where trauma is used to really desensitize people and to rip up their minds so they can be used with certain personalities and things like that. That's something completely different. I'm really talking about the programming of the masses. How do they program people? Well, like I said, programming itself is actually very natural. We take in from our elders, from our family. So you're born in a certain family, certain area, certain culture, so that will be programming in itself. But what the dark energies have done for centuries now is taking, places, like in governments, taking over power. So they started to adjust the programming. So they started to mess around with that. They made sure that most people are born in a system that they have to work. Well, that in itself is a form of slavery. So you have to work, you need to feed yourself, you need to pay taxes, you need to, mortgage, you name it. They put that in place to keep people at a survival mode. So people don't have time to think about things or start creating or maybe become aware of all these patterns, because they have to work all the time. It keeps them busy. And they purposely done that. It's part of the survival mode. And I'm not even talking about people that truly live in slavery and really are used in all kinds of ways. But this is the most people, at least in the Netherlands, have a job. They need an income. They need to pay things. A lot of them are worried about that, because that's a perfect way of keeping someone in a lower frequency. Keep them in a... The best way to keep people in lower frequency is keep them in a negative state of mind. Worrying, hurt, sadness, things like that. They purposely done that. So as a child, you go to school, maybe even preschool. They've taken over that as well. That's programming as well, that you have to keep quiet, you have to sit in a chair, they are changing the education a bit, but they are the ones supplying all the books. The dark elite have taken over that as well, the dark energies. So they are programming. And a perfect way of programming people is sentences, words, talking. What someone says has energy, and they use it to already instill, especially in children, a certain way of thinking. The mental is the intellectual part is very important. Kind of forget about the creative part. Feelings are not important because really I didn't get anything on school how to deal with my emotions or feelings. Really, I just had to follow along and do as I was told. So there's a lot of obedience going on in schools. That's how I see it. How further you go along the line, it's really, you're getting, how to say, diplomas for being obedient. Like, that's how I view things, especially the school system. So you're taught in that way, programmed in that way. And then, especially with all the technology, and of course the music, these are all methods to program us. Music has a certain frequency. They purposely adjusted the frequency from 432 to 440, which is more negative. So a lot of music you listen to has a negative effect on you. And if you really truly listen to the words they use, the texts, lately there's a lot of auto-tune been going on for years, but it's, if you compare that to the 60s and 70s in the 20th century, the energy of the music has changed. They already started changing that, and they started using music to infiltrate the minds of young people, because the best way to program people is to start as young as possible. That's why now most of the technology is really focused on the young children. So we have music influences, TV is a big influencer. You're just watching and you're just kind of taking it in. Especially when you watch television, it's a very passive way of getting information in, and it's purposely done. You maybe have heard of subliminal messages, but by being very passive, it kind of gets through your conscious mind to your unconscious mind. And that's where they want to go. The best way to manipulate people is by making it seem like that it's something they want, but they really are targeting the unconscious mind. Most people, when they make decisions, it's very unconscious. Most of the time, people don't even realize the decisions they make. We have this system, especially when you learn like a new skill or maybe learning how to drive a car. It first is difficult. You have to think about everything, but we have a system that actually, to our advantage, that a certain time you get everything and you don't have to think about that. You don't have to think about riding a bike or driving a car or doing things. You just do that because it's placed in your, not unconscious mode. It's getting like an automatic response. You just know what to do. You don't have to think about that. Well, they use that against that as well. They want that automatic response. So through music, through TV, Hollywood, movies, things you see, the news, the media, it's a certain frequency. Why is the news always negative? Most of the time it's negative. Why is it the media? When you look at reality shows, it's mostly based on negative emotions or negative feelings. It's to draw people in, the drama. When you look at, drama series, it's called drama for a reason. We do have comedy, but usually there's always something off about that. If you look at detectives, I've watched a lot of detectives, especially British detectives. It's so negative. They're always from broken homes. They have all these addictions. They're always broken people. So you see all the time that people are broken. The messages that come in the movies, there's so much programming going on just by watching all that. You should truly just step aside and look at a movie. What is a movie really telling you? And especially for children who, they don't have really like this capacity to critical think. They really just are a sponge. And look at the technology they use now. Young people have mobile phones, iPads, they watch TikToks, and it's just looking at that is purposely done to overstimulate the children's minds, to keep them hooked on this very low attention level they have. If I watch these TikTok, I think clips are very short, and then there's something else going on and something else going on. That's purposely done to keep the mind occupied. So they are really taken over in so many ways, the mind of someone. And when you, as a child, already been exposed to that, it's very easy to be manipulated later on, especially if you're not conscious of what's going on. So we have media, we have movies. I'm going to put this on my Telegram channel about a documentary from a while ago, The Century of Self. This talks about Edward Bernays, who's the nephew of Sigmund Freud, using psychological tricks to get people to buy things. So they actually stepped away from what people really need to what people desire. So they're tapping into that unconscious feeling of desires. A lot of people have no idea how they truly feel. They're not connected. Then it's very easy to manipulate. If you look at the supermarkets, it's purposely done in a very manipulative way. All the expensive brands are at eyesight, and all the cheap ones are way down there, way up there. So people have to do, that extra activity to get it. They purposely do it like that. It's all thought out. They've got all this information gathered through all these cards that you get from your supermarkets or other shops. They're all connected, especially when you're now buying with your pass. It's easier, so you don't have to have cash money. They know exactly when you're buying something, why you're buying it. There's somewhere a complete file on you, who you are, what your family unit is. They know all kinds of things. It's about gathering information, and that's what they'll use against you. That's why sometimes you get these very personalized commercials that you're like, hey, I was just talking about this, or I was mentioned this, or I was just searching for it, and suddenly you get all these commercials about that. That's all done on purpose. It's manipulating you. Like I said, they manipulate you with your frequency, with the news, the things you see, the things you take in. They manipulate you with music, with words. All the politicians, they use certain terms, they use a certain way of speaking. It's really about manipulating you and keeping you in a certain frequency. So as you can see, it's just like this humongous war we're in. This is so deep on so many levels. Really, if you get out of your, even in your home, you're being manipulated through internet, through the TV if you have one. I don't have a TV for a very long time now, but I do watch things through my laptop. So that's also information I take in. Then, of course, music you listen to has an effect on you. And, of course, if you go outside, you will meet people. They are programmed as well. And, of course, your family, your friends, your environment, they are also programmed in a certain way. Like I said, it's not negative to be programmed, but you have to, it's almost impossible completely step out of it. But that's the situation we're in now, to step out of all the programming that we don't want anymore. Certain things that my family passed through to me, I think are very important. How to be trustworthy. If you say you're going to do something, do that. That's what I was taught. So there are things that are important to keep. Those programmings are not detrimental to me. They're actually important to me to stick to my word, to be responsible, to take responsibility. But other programming, other patterns in my family or around me or coming through news or media are not something I want. That's why we are now in the process of taking back our responsibility. So how do you unprogram yourselves from programs you don't want? Well, that's when shadow work comes in. That's when getting to know yourself comes in. It is so important to take responsibility for yourself, for your feelings, for your actions. You have to look at, what am I doing and why am I doing that? Because then you can decide, maybe you're doing something out of guilt. Maybe you're doing something because you want to please someone. Maybe you're doing something because you felt obliged to do that. These are just examples. But if you understand that, then you can make a decision. Okay, do I still want to do that or not? But you have to take away this, especially if you feel guilty. You know, the politicians have been really pushing what's been going on for the last 2 years. Yeah, it's our responsibility. And if you don't take a certain wasp sting, you are, you know, an awful person and you're guilty of certain things. Well, if you don't see it like, wait, what's happening here? Why am I reacting to this? Hey, this makes me feel bad when they say things. Oh, wait, I feel guilty. Do I want to feel guilty about this? Am I responsible for this? Well, then you can kind of just look at that and then you can make a decision. Well, I don't want to do this, or maybe you do. That's a decision you can make, but at least you are aware of why you're doing things. Just like where the Edward Bernays is targeting, especially with commercials and trying to sell desires to people. You know, you want this is important. If you can just look at it, then you can see, well, do I need it or not? You will not be caught up in that. But like I said, most people are not aware of why they do the things they do. There's also a lot of programming, like, well, that's your character. There's nothing to do about that. That's your character. You just have to live with that. Well, that's, to me, dark energy. How do you say the programming? To make you feel that there's nothing you can do about that, or it takes a lot of time to change that. You don't want to do that. So people are kind of pushed away from getting to know themselves, or really tapping into their own strength, their own power, their own intuition. Then, of course, you have all these, like YOLO, you only live once, so why worry about things? Why be responsible? You're not responsible for that. And then, you know, you only live once, getting away people from that spiritual connection. So there's so much programming going on. Like I said, you just step into a shop, you're being programmed. Even talking to people, they have their programs. They most of the time are not even aware if they're manipulating people or not. That's why it's so important to understand where you stand. What is mine? How do I feel about that? Someone says something. Why does that trigger me? How do I want to respond to that? The more responsibility you take for your actions, why you do things, did you make a certain decision, or why do I want to do this or that? If you're aware of that, then you can make choices from your heart, from your intuition, from your connection with God. That's why it's so important to connect with God, connect with your intuition. Then you know what's right for you. And just because it's right for you doesn't mean it's right for other people. We all have our own paths. But as long as we are kind of just doing things without even knowing why we're doing things, then we can be manipulated, because people will just push the buttons they need, or even the society, the politicians, the news, they just push a certain button and then you just go along, you get scared, you get angry, you get all kinds of things, and then you will react from that. So we really need to do shadow work. That is so important. So I want to leave it at this, and I hope to see you in another video. Bye.